Every note you will ever play will fall into three categories. There's a little bit more drama going on, a little bit more dissonance, usually resolve one of two ways, up or down, but it's not in the chord. This is probably the most tense of the ones we've explored so far. Bucket number one, notes in the chord. Bucket number two, the notes in between the chord tones but still in the key. Right, which usually still seek resolution, but they're not that dissonant to the ear. This third and final bucket definitely is. So when you play these notes, you definitely want to resolve them, unless you're really trying to leave people on edge. So to demonstrate this, let's use a minor 7 chord. And we're just going to be soloing on just the G string. Let's find the notes of this A minor 7, but on this G string. So we've got A, C, E, and G, right? So if every note you're ever going to play falls into three categories or three buckets, then these four notes, which are just the notes of the chord itself, that's bucket number one. So let's hear an example of what they sound like. Okay, so that sounds fine. Nobody's going to be annoyed with you, but it also leaves lots of notes out that we haven't explored. And if you only stick to the first bucket or the first category, it can get a little bit boring. So let's move on to bucket number two, which is notes that are still in the key or the scale, but not in the chord itself. Since we're in A minor, you start with A natural minor or A aeolian. So that means we've got in between the A and the C, which were both in the chord, we have this B note. So when I play this against the chord, you'll hear that there's a little bit more drama going on, a little bit more dissonance. It doesn't feel like it's completed yet, or it sounds like maybe you hear another note after which sounds like more complete than this one. So maybe some of you hear that resolve downwards, like maybe some people hear it resolve upwards. But your ear will tend to hear a note that's not in the chord, but still in the key. Have that little bit of drama going on, and then hear it go, usually resolve one of two ways, up or down, to one of the safe notes, one of the notes in the first bucket. Let's go to the next one. B was a second bucket note in between A and C. Another choice might be this D note. So it's still in the key of A, still in the key of A minor, but it's not in the chord. So again, it might resolve up or resolve down. Most of you probably know the minor pentatonic scale. The pentatonic scale has 5 notes, 4 of which come from the chord itself. And there's one note that's one of these bucket 2 notes, which is this D. So got the 1, the root note, which we were playing here for most of this so far, but you could also play it here. C, there's that color. The only note that sounds incomplete or like it wants to go somewhere else. Then the 5th, which we've been playing here mostly, and then the 7, which we've been playing here, and back to the root note. But if you play, even if you're messing around with minor pentatonic scales, you probably have noticed that when you get to, it doesn't sound like you finished yet, which is why most people are inclined to go because you feel like, oh, that's like the end of my phrase. Okay, so that's the D, which is in between these two, the C and the E notes. All right, the last one, the F. This is probably the most tense of the ones we've explored so far. We've got this E, which is the 5th, which is in the chord, and the 7. And then this is the F we're going to be messing around with. So that one's, you know, quite tragic. The other two you could kind of throw in even if you had this kind of vamp. But that one, you know, if you're going for quite a tragic sound, that's a good choice to go for. Okay, so that takes care of the second bucket. The third and final bucket is the most out there. So bucket number 1, notes in the chord. Bucket number 2, the notes in between the chord tones but still in the key. Right, which usually still seek resolution, but they're not that dissonant to the ear. This third and final bucket definitely is. So when you play these notes, you definitely want to resolve them, unless you're really trying to leave people on edge. When we were in bucket 2, we were choosing this B note, because that's the second note of the scale. This one is actually in the key. B flat, however, is not. So again, any of these notes can work. You're just trying to find ways to get them to resolve back to the notes that are in bucket 1. If anyone's familiar with the Phrygian scale, they're probably familiar with that sound, and therefore it's not that harsh. But if you've never heard that before, then especially that by itself, that just, you know, could sound like a mistake until someone does something with it. The next one we'll play with is this C sharp. Definitely going to be a tense choice because this is a major third, as in the chord that is part of a major chord, and the note that's responsible for making it sound happy. So if you've got a minor chord which sounds sad with this C natural, and you play that against it, you know you're going to be creating that sound. So initially you might be thinking, is this one of those unusable notes? But if you play any of these notes, any of the notes from bucket 2 and 3, you can play them quickly and always get away with it. Even bucket 2, you could probably lean on them for a bit without causing too much bother, but with 3, any of the notes from bucket 3 which are outside the key completely, you're gonna have to move pretty sharpish through them. If I quickly play it though, so not that I would hang out on it, but just between notes. You can make it work. There's definitely phrases you could experiment with that would be cool to play, where you can sneak notes in that you'd think you couldn't. The next one is commonly known as one of the blues notes. So this is the flat 5. So if we just go through the chord tones again, we've got 1, minor third, and 5th. This is here. So this is more commonly used in this type of phrase. So instead of just going straight to the 5th, you might play But even if you do, even if you're not using it as an inflection, like you can just play it straight up. Again, as long as you resolve it. So. The next one is quite a pleasant one. So it is outside of the key, but it's what's sometimes referred to as the Dorian note, or it's the note that makes Dorian Dorian. F that we played in bucket 2. That was quite a tragic sound to play, whereas this major 6, even though the context is minor overall, adding that note, it adds a little bit of hope, or it's more uplifting than the F was. Okay, normally I wouldn't focus on any one note that much, but it's just to make the point. So far we've been playing this G natural. That's been our 7 that's been in the chord. So that's one of our bucket 1 notes. But this one is a major 7. Again, if we were playing a major scale, wouldn't be out of place. But in a minor context, now it sounds a bit more harsh. This minor chord with the major 7, it's a popular chord in film noir. If you've heard any Bernard Herrmann scores, that's quite a common sound. But again, it's a bit tense. So again, you have to find a way to make it work. Okay, there it is. So we've played all 12 notes. So that's every note you could potentially play on that A minor 7. What we've been talking about is applicable on any chord. Bucket 1 is the notes in the chord, whatever it is. And then bucket 2, notes that are not in the chord but still in the key. And then finally the third bucket, just everything else. Everything that you haven't played so far that's outside of the key. And having those 3 buckets in your mind, you're preparing yourself for the type of sound that's about to come out. You never want to be surprised by the sound. You want to know what type of sound is about to come out before you play it, so that you know how to handle it and you know where to take it and where to resolve the phrase. Otherwise, if every time you play something it seems like it's a surprise, you'll spend at least a moment dealing with the sound you just made instead of where to take the phrase that you've started. It's kind of nice to have that idea that you can play any note you want over any chord, and having them in those 3 buckets, going from like the safest note you can play to the most daring note you can play, and knowing before you hit them which bucket these notes are in, it makes for a more relaxed experience when you are improvising, as opposed to just going for it and hoping for the best. Alright, that's us. Hope that helps. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.